Hello, how's everybody doing? Um, I wanted to give a book review. I don't usually do. This is going to be the first book review. This one is I'm studying this one. It's in here. But anyway, this one is really strange because it's hard to find a good book that you like to read, you know? And I was in Barnes and Noble, and I always look for like a good book to read, and it's hard to find. It's hard to find books that that you like to read out of all the books that they have. But sometimes there's like 10 good books in front of you, but you need somebody to help you. I don't know, to help you look or whatever, because when I'm looking for books, I just like look at the cover or something like that, but it's really hard to find a good book that you really want to read. If you do it that way, like you go into the Barnes and Noble or a bookstore or whatever, and you just go in the fiction section or sometimes on the table, and you can look and you can look and you look, and sometimes you find something that's really good or something that's not. I'm just telling you the way I do it, and it doesn't really work that well, but sometimes it works, because like last year I was reading one of the books on the table and I found one. It was about chess. I'll tell you about it later on if this book review works out. And it was a good book, but it was also a movie, okay? And it was a very good book. But the way I find the books the best, the ones that I want to read, because it's a lot of time that you take. I mean, even people that read real fast, and I don't read slow, but I'm saying that, and this is a thick book that I'm going to tell you about, but I don't read slow, but it still is time that you use. It's time that you spend with this book. And I have read some books that was a waste of time, and I didn't finish the book. Okay. So my best method of finding a book that you like is from people that you um that you know or whatever. Uh, that's where I found a lot of the books that I read, because it's so special. Like when you read a book, it's not even like a movie. It's it's so much above movies and everything. I remember when I was younger, I used to read books. Um, it took me. It was strange because, when I was younger, I couldn't. It was so strange because in school, like when they wanted me to read books, I guess I can start out when I was in sixth grade. No, my first experience with book was was it in sixth grade? Yeah, it was in sixth grade, Mrs. Jabuki's class. And there might be some people who know, but I was in Buffalo, New York, in school three, and it was Mrs. Jabuki's class. And I couldn't really read then. I mean, I could read, but there was something complicated about me. Um, that's what my experience was with books. But there's something else that happened. But I want to tell you this story. I mean, my friend told me don't say story. I'm going to tell you this experience. Um, Let me see. Okay, so the class had to read this book, but I couldn't read or something. I didn't read it, you know. Maybe because, like I didn't choose it or whatever. I didn't understand about, like what to read or how to read it. And I did the book review as a joke, and because you had to do the book, a book report in front of the class. And I just joked around with the book because I didn't really read it. And my teacher didn't think I could read, I think, because one time I was sitting in class, and in class she had these projects going on. Everybody was doing their projects, and I was sitting in front of her. And I was the teacher, one of the teacher's pets. And she said, Pierre, read this for me. And I read, but I couldn't read it. I mean, it was like, I can't say that it was what they would call, dyslexia, okay? But it sounded like I couldn't read it. The reason why I know it wasn't dyslexia now, because I remember, and I don't know what grade I was in, I got this book. I don't know how I got it. Maybe it was in a library, school library or whatever, but it was a Lamar book or something like. I remember the title quarter. It was like the Lonely something Lonely Lamar or something like that. The Loner or something, but it was a kid's book, but it was like a regular paperback book. And I remember reading that book from beginning to end. Nobody ever told me about how to read or whatever, but I read that book, and I wasn't a good student. I mean, I was a good student, but I pretty much just got D's and C's, I guess. I would get D's and C's, no A's, no B's. Okay, like my sister and my brother. But that was my own experience, and I read that book, okay? And The Loner, I think the name of it was The Loner, okay? And I understood it, and I just enjoyed that book. So I could read, but it was just something that I did on my own, And another book I read after that, I remember that I read, I don't know which grade I was in, because I was being taught by myself, and then I was being taught by the school. And I learned a lot in school, but I learned a different way. I didn't learn with the test and everything. And I remember when later on, like when I was in like high school, was it high school? Yeah, I was in high school. And they didn't really know how to deal with me, I guess, as far as intellect, or as far as how can I say, academically, how to deal with me. But every other year, they would put me in regular classes, and I would never take any notes. And the teacher would say, read certain books, and I wouldn't read them. And then we had the book report, and I would get up, and I could get up. I was a good student. I mean, I was nice and everything like that. I was on time. I just didn't do homework and stuff like that. Practically, I don't think I could do homework. I didn't want to. It was almost like, okay, as far as English is concerned. But we would give the book report, and I would just joke around like I read it. I remember Death Be Not Proud or something like that. I think that. And the class would laugh. I knew how to, like fake the book report, and everybody would laugh, and she would give me like a good grade on class participation. She was nice to me. That's Knutson, I remember her. And that was in Virginia. And then I remember reading a book on my own. I don't know like which grade I was in or whatever, because it was like I was being taught two different ways. And I'm Okay, You're Okay. Now they got so many I'm Okay, You're Okay books. But I remember picking that book up in a bookstore and just reading it because it caught me. It was like, and I read it from beginning to end. It was just like, I read it. It was so interesting. And you get on the elevator with people, and you do this and you do that. It was really, 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 I loved the book, and I read it from beginning to end. And then I remember I had a cousin who read this book, okay? So I didn't really have that many books. I could read, but I never noticed it. And my mother or whatever, it was like no big deal. I mean, like we never talked about anything academically or anything, so I was pretty much on my own. And I remember another one. It was about my cousin would read books, and she was telling me about this book. I told her about one of my cousins. I told her about I'm Okay, You're Okay, and it was like an inspirational book. And then she read it. Okay, so she liked that book. And then another cousin, like I said, told me about this other book. It was a very popular book. It was about a priest who was in love or some kind of situation with this girl in it was in Australia or New Zealand or something like that. I forgot the name. It was very, very popular book. And I remember reading that but not finishing it. It was kind of good. So I didn't really have a lot of books under my belt, you know what I mean? And we would read all the time at home. We would read, like, that's one thing that we did. Hop on Pop, like the Dr. Seuss books and stuff like that. But we always had books, aside from the Jehovah's Witnesses books. But anyway, my mother bought a lot of books, like Dr. Seuss and fairy tales and stuff like that. So we would read, but it wasn't like, like helping you, like saying it's good to read and you have to know this and you have to know that. So anyway, so it was kind of scattered as far as books is concerned. However, I always liked books, all different kind of books, instructional books, all different kind of books for myself. And so I didn't realize that I was actually like, I didn't realize that I could actually read. I mean, I never put two and two together. But then later on in life, I guess when oh no, because then after that, because I didn't know, it's funny because I didn't know ability to read. I just knew I read, but I didn't learn it from school. I would just did it on my own because I liked the book. If I'm trying to explain to you how it was in my situation. And I think in a lot of different situations where your family is not, they don't talk about academics and stuff like that. Things that you can do is not recognized. So how did I start? So I'm trying to tell you when I started realizing that I could read and that you can go get books and read. And a lot of people don't realize, everybody takes everything for granted. And then plus I was a Jehovah's Witness, and they didn't really talk about, like reading. I remember this as far as being a Jehovah's Witness, you had to do talks. That's another thing. I mean, and you had to read, okay? And you had to read in front of everybody. In my first talk, if Jehovah's Witness, you understand this, I remember that you had to. It wasn't about the ability or anything. You had to read certain things. And I remember when you have this book study, this one book study, one of the quote unquote brothers in the book study, it's a smaller group, and you would be reading, and if you didn't follow around, you would get in trouble because he would go, Pierre, what's the next word? And then you had to say, what's the next word? Like when they're reading and stuff. So there was reading all over the place, And I remember giving my first talk, you have to read a certain section in the Bible. And I was young too. I can't place what grade I was in. And my father, who wasn't a Jehovah's Witness, came to my first talk. They call it a talk. And I read suffering, reading. But nobody ever said do this and nobody said do that. So reading was something that was like forced, but I didn't realize it. And it was just scattered all over the place. So still and yet, even though I read a book and I could read a book, I never realized that I could read. So then, as time goes on, I leave the Jehovah Witnesses. I was married. I left being married. I got a divorce. And I was on my own trying to build my own life outside the Jehovah Witness organization. I'm ex-Jehovah Witness for people who don't realize that. So I was with a friend in Virginia. No, not Virginia. It was in Florida. I had moved to Florida. And I had a friend, if you know what I'm talking about. And he was a priest. I'm just telling you the story because it's so true. And I don't want to say everything, but he was like what do you call it? Episcopalian. Okay. I didn't even know the different religions and everything. But, we would go to church and stuff like that. But I lived with him. And I mean, okay, we were lovers. And it was a relationship. And I don't know why, but and he had an apartment and everything. It was really, really nice. And it was in Florida. And I remember that I started to, okay, want to write. I mean, and this is when the computers and everything came out. So I wanted to write a book, and I wanted to go back to school, and I was gearing toward, taking classes. And I remember I wanted to read, and I think it was Belva Plain. Yeah. Is it Belva Plain? It was an author. I think the name of it is Belva Plain. And I wanted to read this book. But this time, I wanted to read it knowing that I could read. And I'm not even thinking, when I'm doing this, I'm not thinking about, hey, you already read before, So I'm just telling you how broken up academics can be. And I started reading, and I couldn't read. And I said, I got to learn how to read. And little did I realize I couldn't go back. Like I said, everything was mixed up, as far as my life concerned. Nobody ever said anything about academics or anything. So I didn't put two and two together that I could actually read. But I said, I'm going to read. And I started I think I'm almost sure her name was Belva Plain. And I was reading this book, and I couldn't read it. And I kept saying, I'm going to read it. And I would read one word after another. It would seem like dyslexia, but it's not dyslexia because I read, you know what I mean? I just didn't realize that I could read, and that I didn't think about the fact that I have read books before ever since I was very young. And I think when I read that lonely book or whatever, I was like, I'm almost sure I was I was very young, maybe 7 or 8, you know what I mean? But nobody knew I read the book. I didn't tell anybody. So anyway, here now I'm practically in my 30s, I guess, and I'm reading this book, and I can't read it. And I kept saying, I'm going to read this book. But then something happened. I wanted to write. So then I started writing, and I remember it was Word. Word was just being popular with a lot of people. It was popular then, and it was on the computers. The computers were popular. And because I remember when the computers wasn't popular. And my friend had a computer room, and he had an office room, and I would look at the Word, and I didn't like it because I remember Word Perfect. And I wanted to learn Word Perfect because that was the first thing that was very popular, Word Perfect. And it didn't have any beautiful screen and all this other thing that Word for Windows had. So I just got on the computer by myself and just tried to learn about this Word, typing this book. I started to, like I said, I was trying to read, and then I don't know how in the world I got the idea of writing. So then I started writing a book, okay, in chapter 1, you know, and it was flowing, and I was typing. The reason why I could type, because I remember in high school, they had typing classes, and I just wanted to learn the keys. And I remember, I think her name was Miss Collins, she goes, typing is very important. It's going to be more important as the time goes on. That's what she told me. And I remembered that, but I remembered the keys. I remembered how to type without looking at the words. And like I said, I got a D or a C in the class always. But once I learned the keys, that was the most important thing to me. And it was a harder way to type. It wasn't easy at all, because it was like manual, and you had to hit those keys and stuff like that. And it was like a old typewriter. So I knew how to do the keys. So here I am back in this office, and I am typing this book, and I came out like chapter 1, chapter 2, and I was like, well, how in the hell can I write and I can't read? And I just thought I couldn't read. Like I said, I wasn't thinking that, hey, I read books before, but it's a different form. It's a connection when you read. So all this is for a book review, but this is my first book review, so I'm doing this whole story. So anyway, when I was typing this book up, and I made it to chapter 3. It was really something, and I said to myself, I said, how in the world can I type and I can't read? There's something wrong here, you know? How can I type a book if I'm writing a book if I can't read a book? So I don't know what I did, but I did something. I just kept doing it and kept doing it and kept doing it. And then all of a sudden it clicked that I could read. And it was like, oh, I found it. So I had to find, and in my life, I always had to find something, how to do something exactly. I didn't do anything automatic. It wasn't like automatic. I had to know how I did it. So anyway, it started clicking, and I ended up reading I'm almost sure it was Belva Plain. That's the first book I read, and I read the book from one end to the other. Then I got so excited, I started reading like 3 different books, and it was the time of Grisham. I remember The Firm. I think I read, no, it wasn't The Firm that I read the first. It was The Client. And I read that one, and another series, The Client, and there was another Belva Plain. I would read her, and there was another book section that I would read. It was I forgot the name of the name of the books, but it was a series also. This lady would write very prolific, however they call it. She writes a lot of books. She writes a lot of books like Belva Plain and like Grisham. So anyway, I started reading these books, and I could read and everything. So, but then after that, I mean, like, as time went on, it took me, because I had the people that I liked to read, you know, like Grisham, Belva Plain, and this other girl. I forgot the name of her name. I forgot her name. But she tells kind of like spooky stories. Later on, I'll try and figure it out. But then, you know, I got into other books, and how I would find them, people would just tell me about, you know. I'm just saying now people tell me about a book and I like it. And then that's another way of finding a book that you like. But it's very hard to find a book that you like. So now I'm getting into my first book review. Because now I know I can read. After that, that's how I got into reading. And that's how I got into writing. I could write. And I wrote that book. I got up to chapter 8 in that book, and then I started going to college. I went back to college, and I started doing that. And it's funny because, like, when I was in college, there was this reading thing. It's so weird that I couldn't get the connection of that I could actually read. Because I remember in this one school, you had to take this reading test, and I couldn't do it. And then I couldn't click to the fact that, hey, I'm reading books, you know what I mean? And then I can't read this. So you can kind of see how I was until I had to organize that, hey, I could do this and I could do that, It's come from the fact that some families don't recognize academics as something important because you have so many things to do and so many things in life. And if somebody, not every family's like that. And if you have a family who doesn't think or doesn't concentrate on academics, it's hard for the children to actually know what they can do. So anyway, so now I'm reading, and that's how my life was as far as my reading life was. And I do write, and I wrote a script actually as time went on. But I didn't realize the fact that if you did this, you could do this. If you did this, you could do this. If you did this, you could do this. So now this is my first book review with Stephen King. And this is a book called Fairy Tale. I've read Stephen. It's kind of hard for me to get into Stephen King because he writes so many books. And it's hard when somebody writes so many books for me to find. It's not that I like every one of their books, is what I'm trying to say. When I first started out reading regularly, I could read one book after another from that same artist. And then I got a little bit I got, a little bit picky after that to where I wanted certain stories. So I have read a Stephen King's book. The last one I read, which I put it on, it was a story about something I experienced or something that happened to me. But now we're talking about this book, which is the reason why I'm doing this tape. And this is my first book review. So it's called Fairy Tale. And this was at a time when I would go to Barnes & Noble and I would always look at this thing in the cafe, and they had all these, paperback books. And I never really found one. It's pretty hard for me to find a book that I, connected with. Because when you read a book, some people just read for no reason and they enjoy it. But I'm deeper reader. Like I said, when I read it's always been a very deep experience for me because I learn a lot about certain things when I read. So now this is the book that I found, and I have went to this this section where they have in the cafe all the time, and I never really found one that connected so well. And this one I really connected with, and it's called Fairy Tale. I didn't finish reading it, but it was so good. And it's the reason why I say I read deeply is because I learned something. It's just a very deep experience for me to read. That's all I'm going to say for right now. When I keep doing this, I'll add more about my reading. But it's an experience. I read more like an author, the person who's writing the book, how interesting they are in the subjects and everything, and how important each character is. That's how I read, okay? I read like I connect with this book. And that's why it's a little bit more personal for me. So this is one book that I found that I connect with this book. But the funny thing about it is, and this is the deepness in my reading, is the fact that he did some things that I can't realize, and I'm going to figure out why. Like, he has pictures in this book. What was the first time? He has pictures in the book. I'm just looking at this picture that I didn't take a chance to look. I mean, I didn't really look at. And it's like this, okay? Like, he has these pictures in the book for no reason. I really want to know why he put pictures in the book. Okay, it's about things that happen, but the thing about it is, it's not a children's book. And the pictures don't connect with the story. I mean, like, it connects, but it's no reason why he would put the pictures. But I want to understand why he put the pictures. I don't know Stephen King that much to know that that he puts pictures in the book, or he doesn't. I know I read one of his books that was very, very large, Insomnia, and I read the first part. Sometimes when they have a big book, they have part 1 and part 2. And after I read part 1, I felt like I read the book, because when I got into part 2, it was like almost exactly the same thing. And I didn't want to go through the same thing, but I liked the book. So he has these pictures that I don't know why he put the pictures in the book. So that's one thing that hit me in this book. Like, and now it's funny, because after I read, okay, sometimes when I read a book, okay, and they have like a cover, and I don't even understand the cover or the picture. And then when I start reading, I understand the cover and the picture. And it's funny, like, I'm looking at the pictures that of the parts that I already read, and I connect a little bit more with the pictures now. But maybe that's the reason, I don't know. But the pictures really don't hit it for me, okay? But now that I'm going back, it's like a memory thing that I can connect with. But that's one thing I want to deal with the pictures with the book, when they don't have that many, maybe like 3, 4, and I read up to 214, and there's maybe 7 pictures, okay? But there's a reason why he did that, and I want to understand that, why he did that, you know? Excuse me. That's one thing I want to find about the book. And the book also has strange things in it, okay? The name of it is Fairy Tale, like I said. And it's about, and then on the back, it tells you it's about this little, not village, I guess the little town or whatever, like Stephen King, you know what I mean? Of this kid, the kid, I mean, it's like when he's really young, and now he's like 17. And he's going to get, you know, because like right now he's 17 and is 214. So it's going to progress his age. But another weird thing that he put in is the kid is 6'4". I mean, like, that's another thing. Like, why is he 6'4"? I mean, he's 6'4", he plays football and he plays baseball, and he can put things together and pull them apart. I mean, that's another strange thing in the book. And his friend is very old. Like, I don't want to ruin the book if somebody wants to read it, but there's something about the guy's age. Anyway, it comes up to, I can tell you this part. He's actually, when the kid knows him, okay, in the beginning, or gets to know him, he doesn't realize, but the guy is actually 120 years old, okay? But he passes away. But that's another weird thing about this this book is that, like he becomes his friend, and very close friend. And anyway, so as the book progresses, so it's very, very interesting. Another reason why I picked the book is because it has a port. There's in my life, there was always something that I always thought about. It was like a port. And like a port, it's like like we live in this world, okay? And they have it in movies and stuff like that all the time. But there's this one place to where you could go, and then there's a port to another existence. I don't like ports like to time changing. I don't like time changing movies. I hope I'm all right. I mean, I don't want to look bad. I know I'm not that. Anyway, but anyway, so anyway, there's this port. I don't like time passing ports and all this other stuff. I don't like that. To where, to where in the movie or in the book, they transport to the same time and then go somewhere else. However, I did like Back to the Future. But I don't like that kind of concept too much. But Back to the Future series, I loved them and I saw all the movies. I didn't read the books. But this is a different kind of port, okay? So that's why I like the book, because I always had in my mind, I always thought that was very interesting to write about, a port, or just, it was very interesting to me. So anyway, this is about a port. And the old guy lives in a property that has a port. And it's in like a garage or something, and it's hidden, and now is at the time when the kid understands about the port. Okay, of course he doesn't tell anybody. So anyway, that's why I like the book. And I didn't think I would be so much interested in it, but now I'm at the point to where it's very interesting, because he's getting ready to learn about this port, okay? His friend dies, and it's no big deal because it's not going to ruin anything, because when you're reading the book, he's actually, like, he talks about this dog, and the dog, it's a very nice dog. I even like the dog. And the thing about it is that he states in the book while you're reading it, he goes like, there's this dog, and actually something happens to the dog, and then they give him meds, and they go, well, the meds he's with these meds, because the dog is really old, and they have to give him, he needed somebody gave him some medication, the experimental medication, you'll find that out, secretly or whatever, and they were like, it was this time to where it's almost like everything had to be registered. So it's like in the year 2000 and something, but everything has to be like, if you have a dog, it has to be registered or something like that in this area or whatever. Everything, like nowadays, is going toward, like when you go to the vet or whatever. But anyway, he didn't want to register his dog or something. I don't know. I don't have a dog, so I don't understand. I don't know if you had to be registered or whatever. But the vet, you had to have, your dog has to be registered. So anyway, he doesn't want to register his dog. So he finds his friend, and the friend goes, well, we have some medication because there's nothing you can really give this dog because he's dying. He's old. He's like 70, 80 something, going on 80. And they give him this med, and they go, but the thing about it is the meds will help him, but there's going to be a point in time when it's time for him to go, he's just going to like pass out. He's just going to die. You know what I mean? But this is going to make him feel better for his last few months. And they get this, he's only going to live maybe like a month or 2 months, 6 months at the most with these meds. What I was thinking is that the kind of meds that he has is more like for pain, okay? Because the dog is so much in pain about everything, and the meds, I think, take away the pain to where the dog doesn't realize that, You know, he still has problems, but like walking and going up the stairs, he won't feel the pain that he does, you know what I mean? Because of the meds. So anyway, and they say in the book, so they don't really care about, you know how books are, you know? And when they talk about the dog, they go, actually, the dog is going to live longer than the man. Okay. Okay. So they tell you these things. This is how the book is, which I like. I like that when they do things like that. You know what I mean? Tell you little snippets of what's going to happen. So anyway, I really like the book, and I want to, this is my first book, and I want to say it's a very good book. And as I go on, and if I finish it, it seems like impossible for me not to continually like it because it's so well. And I'm actually reading another Stephen King's book, which is very interesting, but the reason why I don't really read it like I read this one, because it doesn't have that connection, that glare, that, you know, some people just read Stephen King because they like Stephen King. And to me, it has to be so deeply interesting. And I think it's almost like it has to be to where whoever wrote it is in love with the story themselves. Because like I said, I read, but it has to be, I connect something with the author. And this one, I'm almost sure whoever wrote this book really enjoyed and had stable characters. They didn't really like have to figure out this and figure out that, you know, for a paycheck or whatever. So this is the book I'm recommending right now, and I'll tell you if I finish it. And that's it for my first book review. And this one was long because I had to explain to you my whole concept of reading and everything like that. So it's Stephen King, and it was written in the 2000s, in the millennium. I think it's 2012. Let me see when it was written. I think I don't have my contacts on, but it was copyrighted in 2022. Believe it or not, copywritten 2022 by Stephen King. So that's my first book review, and I actually say, okay, for now, and I'm going to keep going on with this book. For now, I would give it, I would really give it like a 9. I can't give it a 10 yet because I'm only like over 1/4 of the book, going on 1/3 of the book, and right now I give it a 9. Okay, so thank you very much. It's Stephen King, Fairy Tale, and this is the book. I don't know if they if they switch this thing or whatever. Thank you very much. See you later. Bye-bye.